massive collection of blockbusters, streaming hits, you name it. We're talking everything from Oppenheimer's massive success to Barbie's surprising impact. We're breaking down all those trends shaping the entertainment we love.
It's not just entertainment, though,
Yeah.
is it? It says a lot about us. These movies and shows we're going to talk about really capture what we're anxious about, what we value, all the things everyone's talking about these days. It's a really interesting way to see our culture right now.
Okay, so let's start with Oppenheimer. Cillian Murphy is getting tons of Oscar buzz for his performance, and some are even saying it's Nolan's best film. While I was amazed by the visuals and the acting, the pacing did have me checking my watch a few times, I have to admit.
Oh, that's just classic Nolan. He lives to make you wait for it, but when it hits hard. And, even during those quieter moments, the supporting actors are incredible. I mean, Emily Blunt and Matt Damon, always amazing. But Robert Downey Jr., now that was a transformation. A world away from Iron Man, that's for sure. And frankly, he steals every scene he's in.
Oh, absolutely. He completely disappeared into that role. And speaking of disappearing into a role, let's talk Barbie. Now, I know it seems like the complete opposite of Oppenheimer, but stick with me. This movie sparked conversations I never thought I'd be having, and Greta Gerwig deserves every award for directing it. It's funny, it's smart, and it really makes you think.
Barbie is the perfect example of how to make a movie that's entertaining and makes you think about important stuff at the same time. Yeah, it's satirical, but underneath all the fun, it's tackling some really complex issues like gender roles and what it even means to exist. It even looks at the crazy world of corporations and, of course, the casting. Genius. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. They completely embody their characters and add so much depth.
Exactly. You go in expecting some lighthearted fun, and you come out thinking about life, society, everything, and talk about getting people talking. The
Yeah.
memes, the TikToks, all the articles, Barbie started conversations about feminism, identity, what it means to be yourself in this day and age. It's incredible to see a film spark that kind of dialogue.
And that's when you see how powerful these cultural moments really are, right? They
Yeah.
get us talking, debating, really thinking about things.
Mhm.
But it's not just films doing this. Streaming services like Netflix and HBO are now hugely influential in shaping what we watch and how we experience it. Like, take The Bear, for example. It's such a raw, intense show set in a struggling Chicago sandwich shop, and it's grabbing people's attention just as much as those big-budget films.
The Bear really shows how streaming services are all about those unique, specific stories. You wouldn't think a show about a sandwich shop would be that interesting, but the writing, the characters, the intensity, it all sucks you in. And Jeremy Allen White, his acting is incredible. He deserves an Emmy for sure.
It's like this raw intensity that just pulls you into their world. That feeling of pressure, of wanting to prove yourself, it's something a lot of us can relate to,
Yeah.
especially these days. And that brings us to another show that had everyone hooked. Succession, the drama, the family dynamics, it was impossible to miss.
Oh, Succession. Definitely some of the best TV out there. The writing in that final season, the way they played with power, the betrayals within the family, it was like watching Shakespeare, but with way more money.
Totally. You were always on the edge of your seat wondering, okay, who's going to come out on top? Who's getting backstabbed next? It was such clever writing, and it just shows how much streaming has changed things. These shows spark so many discussions online, fan theories. You never really saw that with regular TV.
You're so right. And speaking of how streaming has changed the game, it's also opened us up to so many stories from different cultures, like Squid Game, for example. That came out of nowhere and just blew up.
Squid Game was huge, a global phenomenon. It proved that people want to hear different kinds of stories, and that subtitles aren't a big deal if the story's good enough. It's amazing how streaming has leveled the playing field, giving a voice to people and stories that we might never have seen otherwise.
It's a fantastic time to be watching TV and movies, that's for sure. But before we move on, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about that relatable intensity. Because another show that totally nailed that feeling in a completely different way was The Last of Us.
The Last of Us was a fantastic adaptation. They took this video game that people love and made it even more emotional. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. Phenomenal. Career-defining performances.
They were unbelievable, and they really made you feel the weight of that world after the apocalypse, the danger, the desperation, but then those moments of hope, of humanity. It was so well done. And speaking of hope and humanity, even with all the upside-down craziness, we can't forget about Stranger Things.
Stranger Things is a great example of how to do nostalgia, right? It takes you back to the 80s, but it also explores these universal themes of friendship, courage, facing your fears, and it gave us moments that really stuck with people.
That scene with Eddie Munson playing guitar in season 4, so good. Gave me chills. It's the perfect example of how Stranger Things blends those nostalgic vibes with real excitement and characters you care about. And speaking of shows with passionate fans, another one that gets nostalgia and iconic moments is The Mandalorian.
Oh, The Mandalorian. This is what happens when you take something like Star Wars, give it to talented people who understand it, and just let them go for it. They captured the feel of the original movies, but brought in new characters and stories that clicked with everyone, even people who are new to Star Wars. And then, of course, you've got Grogu stealing hearts all over the place.
Baby Yoda fever was real. And it just shows you how much these streaming shows can impact us. It's not just about watching them, it's how they become part of the culture, how they get people talking, even what we buy. But seriously, it's interesting how these shows, from The Bear to The Mandalorian, all seem to be about the same thing. How important human connection is, no matter what's going on around us.
It's a good point. It makes you realize that even though these shows are all so different, they all touch on something we all experience. Whether it's dealing with a changing world, trying to figure out who we are and where we belong, or just navigating family and ambition. They hold up a mirror to us and the times we're living in.
Yeah, it's like all these shows and movies are reflections of ourselves, you know? They show us all the good and bad, the things that make us human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the best part about entertainment right now is that we're not limited to just a few familiar stories anymore. Streaming has changed everything.
Totally. It's not just about Hollywood these days. There are amazing stories coming from everywhere. Like, who would have guessed that a Korean show about a deadly game show would be such a huge hit?
I know, right? Squid Game showed everyone that a good story can come from anywhere and connect with people all over the world. And that's what makes this such an exciting time. The next big thing could come from anywhere.
It really could. It could be a sci-fi movie from Nigeria, or a drama from a small town in India, or even a hilarious comedy from Argentina. There are so many possibilities.
That's what's so great about all this. Streaming gives a platform to so many talented people who probably wouldn't have had the chance to share their stories with the world before.
It feels like we're seeing a whole new world of storytelling with so much diversity, different points of view, and voices we've never heard before. What an awesome time to be watching TV and movies.
You got that right. And for anyone who loves to dig a little deeper, really think about what these stories mean, well, there's never been a better time to be into pop culture.
So true. Well, there you have it, everyone. We've gone from huge explosions to pink worlds, and we've talked about all the big trends in pop culture. We've also talked about why these stories are so important and how they impact us. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.